If you opened a toy chest in 1962, you wouldn't find much that looks safe by today's standards. Steel, glass, loose wiring, actual chemicals. Nothing childproof about any of it. Today we're building a case. 9 toys, one final piece of evidence. On their own, they look like nostalgia. Together, they explain what America quietly stopped expecting boys to learn. The first clue starts with a father's willingness to hand his son something genuinely dangerous. Not because he was careless, because he believed it would make the boy smarter. In 1950, at the exact dawn of the nuclear age, a father in Ohio named Frank Kowalski brought home the most expensive gift he'd ever bought his son. $50 for a science kit, a small fortune at the time. Inside it, a working cloud chamber, a spinthariscope, a Geiger counter, and something no toy has contained before or since. Real, low-level uranium ore, sealed in 4 small jars. Tommy spent Christmas afternoon in the basement watching invisible particles leave visible trails. At 9, he understood that matter itself was made of something smaller than he could see. By the early 1960s, the Atomic Energy Lab was already gone from shelves. One of the earliest casualties of a shift that hadn't finished yet. File that away. It's the first thing that gets taken off the table. It won't be the last. Then came something a boy had to earn the hard way. It fit inside a shirt pocket, and it sounded nothing like a toy once it started running. A working 2-stroke internal combustion engine, machined to tolerances finer than a human hair. A boy named Richard, 12 years old in a Santa Ana backyard in 1961, spent his first afternoon with a Cox .049, getting it wrong. Too much fuel and it flooded. Too lean and it screamed. He pulled his hand back too late and nicked a knuckle on the prop. His father didn't fix it for him. He learned to tune the needle valve entirely by ear after that, and he found the sweet spot by getting it wrong first. 2 clues in, and this isn't really about toys anymore. By now the pattern should be obvious. The third piece breaks it wide open. What matters here is the shift that came right after it, because everything before this point taught a boy how to fight, tune, or build something with raw force. What comes next asks for something more exact. Not every lesson came from steel. The 4th piece ran on something you couldn't see or touch. At the start of the decade, the Lionel train set sat in more American basements than almost anything else built for a child. A veteran named Walt, back from the Pacific years earlier, spent an entire winter with his son Michael soldering track joints by hand, wiring transformers that could run 2 trains independently without colliding, teaching him circuits before he knew the word. One bad connection meant the whole layout hummed instead of ran, and starting over was simply part of the deal. Nobody called it engineering. It just was. Up until now, every lesson came from a father. The next one comes from an admiral. A $3 toy sold in dime stores, built by kids at their kitchen tables. It made one admiral genuinely nervous. In 1960, that plastic Revell model ended up at the center of a classified congressional hearing, 400 feet under the Atlantic Ocean. It was a scale model of the Navy's first Polaris missile submarine. Admiral Hyman Rickover, the man who ran the entire nuclear submarine program, was asked directly whether that toy should be sold. He said, on the record, that he was aghast it had been. The model was accurate enough that a trained ship designer could look at it for an hour and learn things the Navy considered classified. A boy gluing together a submarine kit on a Saturday afternoon had, without knowing it, built something precise enough to worry an admiral. This is where the case starts changing. Up until now, every toy had disappeared for a different reason. This one didn't. A chemistry set with real reagents, a spirit lamp, and a manual that assumed a boy could be trusted around an open flame. That started changing almost as soon as the decade did. In 1960, a new federal law required chemistry sets to start labeling their contents as hazardous, and manufacturers began quietly pulling the alcohol lamps and strongest acids out of the box. Years before anyone talks about the safety panic of the 70s, the real chemistry set didn't disappear all at once, It was legislated away, one ingredient at a time. Starting the exact same year its own inventor's health began to fail, two pieces of evidence now pointing the same direction, not toward better toys, toward less trust. And remember Frank Kowalski standing in that basement with his son and 4 jars of uranium? 10 years earlier, that looked like responsible parenting. By now, it already looked reckless. The 7th clue was hiding inside a piece of math almost nobody noticed. Tinker Toys look simple, wooden spools and sticks, but inventor Charles Pajot secretly built the entire system around precise geometric ratios. Competitors copied the parts, they still couldn't make them work the same way because they copied the wood without understanding the math. Long before a boy ever opened a geometry book, he was discovering why triangles refused to collapse. Lincoln Logs came from somewhere even stranger, not a toy factory, a construction site in Tokyo. John Lloyd Wright had watched his father design the Imperial Hotel using interlocking beams that could flex during earthquakes. Years later, he shrank that same idea into a cardboard box. Every cabin a boy built was quietly teaching one of the same structural principles that helped one of the world's most famous buildings survive disaster. The 8th piece exists because of a schoolgirl and a rule nobody expected to matter this much. English schools only allowed a toy in class if it fit inside a matchbox. So a father named Jack Odell built his daughter a tiny, precisely scaled brass roadster that did exactly that. What it actually trained into a generation of boys wasn't obvious at the time. The ability to hold a complex machine in their head at a scale small enough to fit in a pocket. The same instinct they'd later need to read a blueprint or plan a route across a country that was busy paving itself with interstate highways. We're getting close to the answer now. There's one piece missing. The last toy in this case belonged to Hasbro. To sell a doll to boys in 1964, they had to invent an entirely new word for it. The action figure. Built for a kind of war that had stopped looking like the massive trench lines their fathers fought in, and started looking like small units making fast decisions in unfamiliar terrain. A boy running a backyard mission with G.I. Joe wasn't just playing soldier, he was mentally rehearsing something real. Managing limited resources, weighing risk, thinking 2 moves ahead under pressure that wasn't going to wait for him to catch up. By now, coincidence has stopped being a convincing explanation. 9 inventors, 9 companies, none of them working together. Yet somehow they all expected a boy to learn the exact same thing. That's when the answer finally becomes impossible to ignore, and it isn't in any of the 9 boxes. It's in what happened to the people who made them. The 10th piece of evidence isn't a toy at all. It's what happened to the companies behind all 9 of the others. In 1961, Alfred Gilbert died. The safety laws that had already started stripping the chemistry sets down kept tightening around everything else his company made. By 1967, the A.C. Gilbert Company was bankrupt. Its name sold off in pieces to people who'd never watched a boy learn anything from a box. 2 years later, Lionel was sold by the family that built it. 2 of the biggest names in this entire case collapsed within 2 years of each other. At the exact same moment the country was deciding a toy shouldn't ask a child to work for it anymore. So here's the verdict. Not that the toys got worse, that the country stopped expecting a boy to earn what he learned. By the end of the decade, the industry had figured out something Gilbert's own failed television campaigns never did. You didn't need a toy that taught a child anything. You needed one that showed up in his living room every afternoon and asked nothing of him at all. If any of these sat in your closet, or your father's, tell us which one in the comments. We already told you how an Erector Set helped build a working heart machine in 1949. What we didn't tell you is what happened to the man who invented it once the world stopped wanting to buy what he was selling, and how one company bought its name back decades later and proved that instinct never disappeared. That's the next video, linked above. It'll show you exactly what saving something everyone else had given up for dead actually looks like. That's what we do here at The Forgotten Gentleman. We revisit the world you grew up in and uncover what history quietly left in the background. Not to take anything away. The memories are the whole point. They just deserve the full story.